morning. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hi, my name is Officer Jared McNulty. I'm a police officer with the Lone Star Police Department.
What type of training do you have?
I have the basic police officer training that I review each year.
And what are your duties as a police officer?
I observe and report, and I maintain public safety.
What were you doing on October 2nd, 2014?
I was driving down, Frontage Road. I was heading east.
Did an incident occur during this time?
Yes, off to my left, I saw Audi with its headlights on, and I pulled into the parking lot because of the way the Audi was positioned.
Around what time was this?
This was around 3 a.m.
You
2:11 a.m.
You mentioned that this incident happened inside of a parking lot. What county is that parking lot in?
It was in Lone Star County.
Would you recognize a map of this area if I were to show it to you in court today?
I would.
Your Honor, at this time I'm approaching opposing counsel with what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 3 for identification purposes. I'm approaching the witness with that same document. Officer McNulty, I just handed you Exhibit 3. Could you please tell the jury what that is?
It is a picture of the area that I was patrolling at the time and where I saw an Audi.
Does it fairly and accurately depict the scene where this incident occurred?
It does.
Does anything appear to be altered in any way?
Besides the labels, no.
Your Honor, at this time the state offers Exhibit 3 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
So ordered.
And I ask for permission to publish an enlargement for the jury.
It's in evidence. Your usual. A larger picture the same.
Yes, the same thing that's already been
Any
entered.
objection?
No, Your Honor, I just asked that I may reposition myself so that I can
Sure.
see the demonstrative as well.
Officer McNulty, if you'll please step down. Now, which road were you driving on?
I was driving on Frontage Road.
What direction were you driving?
I was headed east.
Could you draw an arrow indicating the area that you were traveling in? And what could you see while you were on this road?
I could see an Audi in this parking lot, and with its headlights on and its doors open.
Could you draw a square indicating where that Audi was when you saw it? Could you see any other vehicles in the parking lot at that time?
I could also see a red truck in the parking lot.
Could you draw a square indicating where that red truck was? From what you could see, was the red truck able to leave the parking lot?
No, from the position of the Audi, the red truck was not able to exit the parking lot through the normal means of egress.
Who did you identify this Audi as belonging to?
The Audi belonged to Pete Mitchell.
Could you write his initials, PM? Here? Who did you identify the red truck as belonging to?
And that was William James right here.
Did you write his initials, WJ? Based on your investigation, who else was in the red truck that night?
A friend of William James, JT Samuels, was also in the vehicle at the time.
Now, after seeing the vehicles in this position, what was the next step in your investigation?
Well, I pulled into the parking lot and I saw a scuffle going on in the parking lot.
Can you draw an arrow in the direction that you pulled into that parking lot?
Okay.
And you mentioned this scuffle. Where was the scuffle taking place in that parking lot?
It was about right here.
What did you do when you saw this?
I announced my presence and indicated that I was a police officer, and I broke up the scuffle and separated the parties. One party had pretty severe laceration on his head, so I attended to him, provided first aid.
Where did you attend to him?
I moved that party to about right here.
At the end of your investigation, where was the Audi in that parking lot?
At the end of my investigation, the Audi had moved over to about this parking spot, which is in this picture taken up by another vehicle.
Thank you, Officer McNulty.
Speculation? Hearsay, Your Honor.
Speculation?
And hearsay, Your Honor.
I'm sorry?
Speculation and hearsay, Your Honor.
Hearsay. What do you say about that?
This would not be speculation, as this is directly what she told him. He's not speculating as to what she said. As far as hearsay, we believe that when Kelly Bradshaw takes the stand today, she will make several inconsistent statements. Pursuant to Rule 613B, we can provide extrinsic evidence of those inconsistent statements. In this jurisdiction, we cannot call rebuttal witnesses to offer these inconsistencies, so the only means of providing that extrinsic evidence is through this witness on the stand.
All right, so it's a matter of form, because you can't call him or rebuttal when you anticipate that she will say something different.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so it's a form.
Your
issue.
Honor.
Yes.
This isn't a rule of mock trial that they get to do this because it's inconvenient for them. The Rule 613 says that you have to call this witness, confront them, give them the opportunity to admit or deny. And if they deny, then you have the opportunity to call other witnesses to show the inconsistency and rebut that inconsistency.
Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 613, it does not establish an order that a witness must be confronted with this statement. It merely says that we must confront that witness with a statement. We do intend to confront Ms. Bradshaw with these statements later in today's trial, and we expect that to be an inconsistent statement. If it's not inconsistent, we will strike it from the record at that time, but this is the only means of extrinsic evidence.
Here's what I'm going to do, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Out of a sense of fairness, it's not for the truth of the matter asserted, it actually is for the opposite of the truth of the matter asserted. So out of a sense of fairness, I'm going to allow the testimony to come in with the understanding that typically I would not do this, but given the context we're in today, I'm going to allow you to ask the questions.
Thank you, Your Honor.
What did Ms. Bradshaw say that she heard?
Ms. Bradshaw said she heard Mr. Mitchell egging on Mr. James in the parking lot.
And what did she say, or where did she say she was when she saw this incident occur?
She was over in the Bull Crabs parking lot.
Thank you. Now, you also mentioned some other witnesses indicated that there was a flashlight on the scene. Did you ever find that flashlight?
I did.
Would you recognize that flashlight if I showed it to you in court?
I would.
Your Honor, at this time, I'm approaching opposing counsel with what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 1 for identification purposes. I'm approaching the witness with the same document. Officer McNulty, I just handed you what's been marked as Exhibit 1. Could you please tell the jury what that is?
It is a backlight, black flashlight, pretty long one.
Does it appear to be in the same or substantially same condition as when you recovered it from the scene?
It does.
Does anything appear to be altered in any way?
No.
Your Honor, at this time, the state offers Exhibit 1 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
So admitted.
Where did you find this flashlight?
It was on the ground near the truck.
Where did you place the flashlight?
When I saw the flashlight, I was still securing the scene, and I saw that it was a potential threat, so I secured it in my cargo pants pocket.
Why would you put it in your pocket?
Well, to secure the scene, to make sure that no one used it against me or another person at the scene.
Who did you focus on gathering information from at the scene?
The parties that were available.
And when you saw William James, what was his condition?
William had a pretty severe laceration on his head, and I moved him over to the curb, to the sidewalk, and started to administer first aid.
What was the condition of Pete Mitchell when you saw him?
When I spoke to him, he didn't have any noticeable injuries on him, but he was covered in blood.
What clothing had blood on it?
His hooded sweatshirt, his pants, and his shoes.
What parts of his body were covered in blood?
His hands as well.
What physical appearance did you notice of him?
I noticed that he had, when I spoke to him, I got close and I could smell alcohol off of him, and then I also noticed that he had some pretty severe glassy eyes.
While speaking with him, what did he tell you happened that night?
He indicated that there was an argument within the 7-Eleven and that it moved out into the parking lot.
Who did he say was driving his vehicle?
He never indicated who was actually driving his vehicle.
Did he say he was driving?
No, he claimed he wasn't because he didn't have a license.
What did you notice about these statements he was making to you?
They seemed inconsistent because right before he was stating that he was moving his vehicle in uncertain terms.
What did he say was being What did he say about a weapon being used?
He said, he never saw a weapon, a flashlight, and he claimed he doesn't even own a flashlight.
After speaking with him, who did you ultimately charge in this case?
I charged Pete Mitchell with, the assault and disorderly conduct, and I also charged William James and JT Stevens with the disorderly conduct as well.
Why didn't you charge JT or the defendant with first-degree assault?
Because they didn't have any, injuries.
After going to the police station and making these formal charges, where did you go next?
I went to the hospital to check on William James' injuries to see the extent of them.
What was happening at the hospital while William James was there?
Just medical help for him.
Were you able to do anything to document his injuries?
I took a few photographs.
Did you do anything to document the defendant's injuries?
The defendant didn't have any injuries.
Did he ever say anything about his legs being hurt that night?
He never indicated anything to me.
Was he able to walk that night?
As far as I can tell, he walked just fine.
Did you see anything to indicate that the defendant had a single injury?
No,
Did you give him a fair opportunity to tell you everything that happened that night?
I did.
You mentioned these photographs that you took of the victim, Willie James. Would you recognize the photograph if I showed it to you in court today?
I would.
Your Honor, at this time I'm approaching opposing counsel with what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 11A for identification purposes. I'm approaching the witness with that same document. Officer McNulty, I just handed you what's been marked as 11A. Could you please tell the jury what that is?
It is a photo of the victim in this case.
Does it appear to be in the same or substantially same condition as when you took it?
It does.
Does it fairly and accurately depict the injuries that Willie James had that night?
It does.
Your Honor, at this time, the state offers Exhibit 11A into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. We object to this document under Rule 403. The probative value is substantially outweighed by the prejudicial effect. We already know his injuries. They've been stated. The jury doesn't need to see this. It will only prejudice them against my client. Further, Your Honor, a major question today is the extent of these injuries, where they came from. Pete hit him once with the flashlight. That's it. To say that all of these injuries he sustained came from Pete it's substantially prejudicial, Your Honor. It's substantially more prejudicial than probative. Showing the jury this document, this photograph, is inadmissible under Rule 403.
I think it's probative. Now, the question about whether it's a result of a single blow or not seems to be a matter for cross-examination, so I'm going to allow it.
Yes, Your Honor.
Permission to publish this to the jury?
Go ahead.
Using this photograph, could you please show the jury what injuries Willie had?
He had a severe laceration on his head here.
Objection, Your Honor. He's being asked to testify to the injuries. This is something for a doctor to testify. I fear that he's going to go much more in depth than this, and that will definitely prejudice the jury against my client today.
You know, what's been asked and answered so far seems fine. Now, I don't want to preclude you from objection if you stray too far afield downstream, but I'm going to allow that question and answer.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor.
What injuries could you see, and please explain to them on that photograph to the jury?
The injuries that I could observe were the laceration at the top of his head, over his eyebrow, and then the swollen black eye.
Thank you. I have no further questions at this time. Permission to approach and retrieve and publish these documents to the jury for their review.
I'll proceed. All right, does the defense have any questions of the officer? You may
Yes,
cross.
Your Honor, we do. May it please the court. Officer McNulty, you arrived at the 7-Eleven parking lot at 2 a.m. on October 2nd, correct?
I did.
you saw William James and Pete Mitchell fighting, wrestling on the ground, isn't that right?
I did.
But you didn't see anything that happened before, did you?
No, I did not.
You weren't there when Mr. James began antagonizing Pete Mitchell in the 7-Eleven, were you?
I only observed, or I only can report to what was stated to me.
So you weren't there, were you?
I was not there.
You weren't there when Mr. James and his buddy JT Sanborn stormed Pete Mitchell's
Objection,
car,
Your
were
Honor.
you?
Testifying, she's stating these things that he did not see before as if they are facts. This witness is, or she is testifying to things the witness did not see.
I think that's fair cross-examination. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. You weren't there, Officer McNulty, when Mr. James and his buddy JT Sanborn stormed Pete Mitchell's car, blocking him into the parking lot, were you?
I arrived at the scene at 2:11. Those incidents occurred before 2:11.
You weren't there, were you, Officer McNulty?
No.
You weren't there when Mr. James was smashing Pete's legs between the car door, were you?
Again, those are reported to happen before 2:11. I arrived at 2:11.
So you weren't there.
No.
And Officer McNulty, you're a police officer with the Lone Star County Department, correct? You're not a detective.
I'm not.
You're not a crime scene analyst.
I'm not.
A police officer.
Yep.
This would explain why you tampered with evidence when you arrived at the scene last October, wouldn't it?
I never tampered with evidence. I secured the scene by placing the flashlight, I assume you're talking about, into my pocket to make sure no further injuries occurred.
So you deny that picking up what you allege was a weapon without putting on gloves or using an evidence bag isn't tampering with the scene?
My number one job is public safety.
So your answer,
Yes.
so that is because of a lack of training, correct?
I'm trained first in public safety.
So no training in crime scene analysis, what to do with keeping the evidence intact, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, compound.
I'll break up the question. Your Honor.
Rephrase it.
No training in crime scene analysis, no?
A minute ago, I stated I was trained first in public safety. I also received training in crime scene analysis.
As a police officer, you're telling this jury that you have training in crime scene analysis,
Basic.
but you're not a crime scene analyst.
I'm not.
And on the night in question, you failed to do what a crime scene analyst would do when you picked up that flashlight, moved it, and put it in your pants pocket.
Objection, Your Honor, speculation as to what a crime scene analysis would do in this situation.
I think it's fair cross. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, yes?
Will you repeat your question?
You failed to do what a crime scene analyst would do by picking up the flashlight without gloves or evidence bags and just sticking it in your pants pocket.
Again, my first job is public safety, and that's what I follow my training.
Officer McNulty. Let's see. One moment, I beg the court's indulgence, Your Honor. Officer McNulty. You say you picked the flashlight up for protection that night, correct?
Correct.
But you couldn't have cuffed Pete Mitchell that night?
Well, at the time, I hadn't determined who was going to be arrested at the time.
But you said it was a safety issue. Couldn't you have cuffed him?
I could have.
Couldn't you have put him in your squad car?
I also could have.
Officer McNulty, you remember arriving on the scene correct?
Yes.
You just stated the route you took to get there, correct?
Yes.
One moment. Entry is not straightforward. Thank you. Officer McNulty, oh, I don't need that, thank you, Jim. You say you were coming from Frontage Road, correct?
Correct.
And coming from this direction, you say you could already see a truck and specifically an Audi vehicle, correct?
Correct.
What are these, Officer McNulty?
Those are trees.
You can see through trees, Officer McNulty?
You see where I placed my arrow? I was slightly above, further east of that arrow, and I was driving incredibly slow, so I was able to see into the driveway.
From all the way over here, you could see what was going on.
I was to the left of the arrow.
You said you were coming this way.
Yes.
Okay, Officer McNulty. Thank you. And back to arriving on the scene, you say when you arrived, you separated William James and Pete Mitchell, correct?
I did.
And you remember immediately tending to Mr. James, correct?
Yes, he had apparent injuries.
You took one look at my client's beard and shaggy sweatshirt and just assumed he started the fight, correct?
He didn't have any injuries on his head, so I attended to the person with the injuries on their head first.
And you assumed that Pete started it.
No,
Officer McNulty, the case was open and closed from the moment you laid eyes on Pete Mitchell, wasn't it?
no, it's not.
Well, you say you didn't charge William James or J.T. Sanborn with assault because you say Pete didn't have any injuries that night, right?
That's correct.
You never asked him if he had any injuries, did you, Officer McNulty?
Not directly.
You never, not directly, you never asked him at all if he had any injuries, did you, Officer McNulty?
He never indicated that he did.
The case was open and closed because you just assumed he didn't have any injuries without looking into it, correct, Officer McNulty?
Yes.
When you arrived at the scene, there were a lot of people around the two cars, weren't there?
There was 5 in total.
You called for backup, didn't you?
I did.
And at the end of the night, Mr. James and his buddy, Mr. Sanborn, were just charged with disorderly conduct, weren't they?
Correct.
But you're not the one who wrote them their tickets for disorderly conduct, are you, Officer McNulty?
I believe it was not.
No, you had tickets say Officer 228 and Officer 229, but you signed them without writing them, correct?
Did you indicate where you're talking about? No, never mind, I see it.
Officer 228 and Officer 229, but you signed them.
That's correct.
You couldn't bear to give a war veteran a ticket for a crime he committed, could you, Officer McNulty?
No.
Officer McNulty, you were distracted that night, weren't you?
No, I wasn't. I was focused on it.
You weren't distracted by Mr. James and his injuries?
I was focused on the crime.
You're focused on James,
Yes.
to the point that you had a car be moved from one parking lot to the other without noticing. Correct, Officer McNulty?
Injuries trump cars moving around.
Trump preserving the scene, as we've already seen, right, Mr. McNulty?
Yes, when somebody's bleeding from their head.
But you know, Pete Mitchell, when you arrived, he was covered in blood too, wasn't he?
Yes.
You ignored him, went straight for James.
Yeah, he was walking around just fine and never indicated that he had any injuries.
You said when you arrived on the scene, they were both on the ground scuffling. So how would you know if he was walking around fine at that point?
Because after I broke up the fight, he stood up.
Officer McNulty, you were distracted by the crowd of people as well, weren't you?
I wouldn't have indicated it was a crowd, it was 5.
Without getting all of the facts, you decided this case was open and closed from the very beginning, didn't you?
From my investigation, I determined that Pete Mitchell was the aggressor.
It never crossed your mind that Pete didn't start the fight, did it?
It did.
It never crossed your mind, Officer McNulty, that Pete was just acting in self-defense, did it?
From my investigation, I determined Pete Mitchell was the aggressor.
Most importantly, Officer McNulty, it never crossed your mind to have an officer go get security footage from one of the 3 establishments in the area that night before deciding that Pete Mitchell obviously was the guy who started it, did it?
Yes.
Yes, it crossed your mind to go get security footage to prove your accusations?
No, that was just a long question. No.
No, you didn't get security footage, did you, Officer McNulty?
No, I did not.
And when you went back to the scene the next day, still didn't cross your mind to ask for the security footage, did it? Well, I guess later that day, I'm sorry, it was early morning hours on October 2nd, and then you went back at 10 p.m., correct?
Yes.
And at that point, you didn't think even then to get security footage to prove your accusations.
No, I did not.
There was a 7-Eleven near the scene, correct?
Yes, there was.
There was a bank, correct?
Yes.
A bar, correct?
Yes.
But no security footage received or retrieved from those 3 establishments.
No, there wasn't. From my investigation, I determined Pete Mitchell was the aggressor.
Open
It
and
was-
shut, right?
It was dark. I don't think the videos would show.
Officer McNulty, you were so blinded by Mr. James and the crowd of people at the 7-Eleven, you failed to follow protocol, didn't you?
I followed our number rule, which is securing public safety.
You say you smelled alcohol on Pete's breath that night, right?
I did.
But you failed to conduct any type of sobriety test, correct?
I was investigating assault charges.
You failed to conduct any type of sobriety test, correct, Officer McNulty?
That's true.
You didn't make him walk in a straight line, did you?
No,
Didn't do a breathalyzer, did you?
I wasn't investigating a DUI.
You didn't conduct a breathalyzer test.
No.
Officer McNulty, between the movement of the flashlight that you carelessly picked up and put in your pocket and the car that you allowed to move from parking lot to parking lot, the crime scene was essentially destroyed, wasn't it?
No.
You're saying the crime scene wasn't destroyed when you moved the main vehicle and a flashlight?
The vehicle didn't have too much to do with it. The flashlight I secured, and the number one piece of evidence was the injury sustained by the victim.
Mr. Officer McNulty, you didn't rope off the area, did you?
Going back to, I was securing the scene for public safety. Roping off the area wasn't the number one goal. It was providing help to the victims.
You had additional police officers come to the scene, but you didn't have, you say like, safety, but you had additional police officers at the scene to help you, and you didn't think to have anyone rope off the scene, Officer McNulty?
I never had additional police officers at the scene. I called for them, but they weren't available at that time.
Well, what about Officer 229 on those tickets that roped them, not you, Officer McNulty?
That was later paperwork that was done.
Those were issued at the scene, Officer McNulty, weren't they?
Yes.
Yes, they were, Officer McNulty. Now, let's go back to you arriving at the scene almost 24 hours afterwards to conduct your continuing investigation. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Yes, Officer McNulty. And one last thing. Pete didn't run when you arrived, did he?
No, he did not.
He stayed on the scene while you were tending to Mr. James, didn't he?
He did.
You didn't handcuff Pete while you were speaking with the people at the scene, did you?
No, I did not.
And you say there were several people at the scene who told you about Pete hitting Mr. James with a hammer, correct?
There was
With
two.
a flashlight, correct?
There was two.
But you didn't take their statements, did you, Officer McNulty?
Going back to public safety, that was my first and number one goal.
Additional police officers, you didn't take their statement, did you?
No.
You took the time to talk to them and sit there and listen to them, but you didn't take the statement, did you?
I wasn't actually listening to them. They were more yelling their statements at me.
You were frazzled, Officer McNulty, by the crowd of people with no help, weren't you?
No.
And to conclude, you didn't handcuff Pete while you were speaking with those people, did you?
No.
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered. She already went through this line of questioning.
I'll continue, Your Honor. You didn't pat Pete down when you arrived, did you?
No, I did not.
You didn't immediately take him into custody based on your observations, did you?
No, I did not.
Or place him in your squad car?
Nope.
He stayed voluntarily, did he not?
He did.
And when you went to talk to him, he voluntarily spoke with you, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
No further questions, Your Honor. Thank you. Redirect, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Now, opposing counsel asked you a few questions about cameras at the scene. Would you recognize photographs of the buildings around that area if I showed them to you?
I would.
Your Honor, at this time I'm approaching opposing counsel with what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 4 and 5 for identification purposes. Approaching the witness with the same documents. I just handed you Exhibit 4 and Exhibit 5. What are those?
Exhibit 4 is a picture of the front of 7-Eleven. Exhibit 5 is the front of First Bank.
Do they fairly and accurately depict the scene that you were at?
They do.
Do they appear altered in any way?
They do not.
Your Honor, at this time, the state offers Exhibit 4 and 5 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, they're irrelevant. We've already seen an overview of the crime scene showing all of these establishments to show this is cumulative and a taking away of time from the jury, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Thank you.
Now, I just handed you these photographs of the buildings that were surrounding that scene. Where are there any cameras that you could have gathered footage from?
I do not see any cameras that are clearly visible in either photograph.
So, based on your investigation, was there any footage that you could have gathered?
No.
When you were speaking with the defendant, when did he ever say that his legs were slammed into a car door?
He never indicated any of that.
When did he ever indicate that he had a single injury?
He didn't.
But who had an injury that you could see?
William James had pretty clear injuries on him.
And who was covered in blood?
Pete Mitchell was.
Thank you. I have no further questions. Permission to